My number 4 best chess game of the 1940s is Grigory Ravinsky versus Vasily Panov from the Soviet Red Army Jubilee Tournament of 1943. Now, these two players may not be very well known to modern chess players, modern Western chess players, but they were strong Soviet masters in the time, and Panov passed his name on to the Panov-Botvinnik attack in the Caro-Kann. In this game, though, it is Ravinsky that is bringing the fire with the white pieces as he scores a brilliant victory. The game opens with a Sicilian Scheveningen. Now, to date, we have a lot of theory in the Scheveningen. We can particularly look at the Karpov vs. Kasparov World Championship matches for some really high-level theory in the Scheveningen. But this is 1943. This kind of theory is just being developed. For example, in this position, almost any modern player would be eager to play g4, the Carey's attack. In 1943, though, Carey's is just getting started and establishing a name for himself, much less a name for the opening that would later carry his name. In this case, we see something different than g4. The g-pawn pushes forward only one square. In fact, this is kind of modern in a way too. To date, we see a lot of players trying fianchetto variations against the Sicilian defense in almost every line. In fact, they are quite poisonous and will take one away from a lot of the established theory. The only problem with playing the fianchetto in this case is that black has allowed the Carey's attack, and you should go for it. Now, after g3, we see both players developed. I'm not going to say that this is really the optimal play for both players, but I'm also not going to critique small inaccuracies at this point. As play develops, we see that black is pushing forward on the queen side, but black is also neglecting development of the bishop on f8 and not choosing to castle. Sometimes you can delay castling if you can achieve productive things and if you're not worried about your king's safety, but in this case, black should be a bit worried about the king's safety, and the next move is a critical error that shows this problem. Black plays the tactical knight takes a3. This move kind of wins a pawn, but it really doesn't matter because black is getting absolutely roasted in the middle of the board. Of course, black's point is that pawn takes a3 removes the defense of the knight on c3. Even in this case, white gets a lot of compensation for the lost pawn, but white has much better. In this position, white plays the crushing e5, smashing through in the middle of the board and opening up the d file when black cannot accept this due to the exposed position of the king on e8. Now we get pawn takes e5, knight c6. This is a very beautiful move, taking advantage of the open d file here and hitting the queen. Of course, the bishop cannot capture because the queen is lost on d8. And the bishop here, the fianchettoed bishop, is revealed to be very powerful. Again, the bishop on f8 not developed, the king in the center, the rook on h8, and the sidelined knight on a3 that was trying to win a pawn all do not help black in any way in this particular position. The queen moves, queen c7, knight takes e5, and now the attacked knight on a3 needs to jump back into the action with knight c4. Knight takes d7, knight takes d7, knight d5, a clever move taking advantage of the pin on the e file. The queen moves over to a7 and knight f4. This is really caveman chess. White's intention is just to sacrifice a knight on e6 and absolutely obliterate black. The problem is that this idea is still effective even if it is caveman chess and even if you see it coming. Now, if, for example, black tries bishop e7, blocking the e-file up and hoping to castle, there's still no time. Knight takes e6, pawn takes e6, and queen takes e6. White simply intends rook e1, bishop g5. White is winning the material back and getting to the black king. It doesn't help that this knight here on d7 cannot move because the rook on c8 will be loose. So in the game, we see black try to block the e-file in a different way. The knight jumps back to e5, but of course blocking the e-file with a piece that's exposed here in the middle of the board is not the most effective way to block. White finds a beautiful way to crash through. Rook takes d7. This is a fantastic sacrifice, and it is a winning sacrifice. If the queen captures on d7, white simply takes the knight that no longer has a knight on d7 to defend it. In this position, white is absolutely crushing thanks to the minor pieces and the fact that black is still not developed. White's pieces are just too active, and maybe black should have played this way, but white should successfully finish off this attack. It doesn't help that you cannot move this bishop because you will drop the pawn on g7. So after rook takes d7, we see the knight pull back and capture on d7. Boom! Time for knight takes e6. Pawn takes e6 and queen takes e6 check. At this point, white is actually down basically a rook, but the attack is decisive. If the king moves over and tries to start running for it right away, it gets hit by the bishop, bishop to g5, king over, queen to c6 check, the king is forced back to b8, and he is caught in an absolutely devastating crossfire here with the bishops on f4 and on g2. Really beautiful stuff. So in the game, we see black try to block on e7, bishop e7, and white plays the accurate move. You might be tempted by bishop to g5, but that's a mistake because after queen c5, black is both defending mate on e7 and attacking the undefended bishop on g5. So there's no time for rook e1 because you lose the bishop on g5. So the accurate move here is rook to e1, attacking and threatening mate right here. And now after queen c5, you still can't play bishop g5, but b4, a pawn move that disrupts the perfect position of the black queen on c5. This is really the only square that the queen can adequately defend on. It can hold the mate on e7 and stop bishop g5. Now it can't do that, and so black must get a little desperate with knight back to f8. Of course, you're not happy to play an undefending move, or an undeveloping move, I mean, but you don't really have a choice. The queen falls back to g4, keeping an eye on this rook and attacking this pawn on g7, and black in turn keeps defending the rook on c8 and defends the pawn on g7, but white is ready to demonstrate another excellent sacrifice to crash through. Rook takes e7 check. Beautiful. After king takes e7, white is able to finish this attack off with two bishops versus two rooks and a knight. The black king is totally exposed in the middle of the board. We see bishop to g5 check. The king cannot go back to f7 because of bishop d5 check. Also, if the king tries to go back to e8, white can pull the queen back to the e file, queen e2 check. You don't want to go to e4 with check. It looks similar, but then you're blocking your bishop's access to d5. And after king d7, queen e7 is actually just checkmate on the board. Never forget about this bishop here on g2. So in the game, we see black trying to run for it with king to d6, and the queen pulls back to d1 with check. If the king tries to go to e6, we have a beautiful checkmate with queen to d5 checkmate here. The bishop on g5 covers the dark squares, the queen covers the light squares, and it's game over. So the king continues trying to run king c7, and now we get bishop to f4 check, king to b6, queen to d6 check, king a7, and then queen over to e7 check. Of course, if the king can't even try to run back anymore, the bishops are holding it here, so it's time to block rook c7, and white missed a slightly faster win here with bishop to e3 check, but the way the game goes is more than good enough. Bishop takes on c7, white has basically regained the material, and the attack is of course decisive here. Queen a1 check, bishop f1 to block, knight to g6 hitting the queen, queen goes to c5 with check, king b7, and bishop to a5, threatening queen c7, among other things. If rook c8 here, which is really kind of the only defense that makes sense, I think, there's queen b6 check and a small tactic to finish things off. It's funny that the queen is exposed here on a1, and white can now play bishop to c7 check with a humorous discovery that picks off that queen on a1. So after bishop a5, instead of trying rook to c8 to try and hold the c7 square, we simply see rook to f8, and now queen b6 check. And in this position, again, black resigns. The same thing is happening. If you go here, there's mate here. And if king here, then white at least has queen takes a6 and bishop c7, a discovery to win the queen over there on a1. Beautiful, beautiful stuff. I don't think you will ever find a more devastating bishop pair in the history of chess. If you want to see more of my best chess games of the 1940s, then simply click on that playlist that is popping up on your screen right now.